like some roses. Nice, big, beautiful.
Capone placed an order for an $8,000 rose sculpture to be picked up at the flower shop the next day, thus ensuring that O'Banion would likely be on the premises, finishing up the order and having it ready for when it was picked up.
November 10th, 1924. Capone's hired guns rub out Dean O'Banion with 6 gunshots. The flower shop murder will shake O'Banion's inner circle to the core, especially his devoted henchmen, Jaime Weiss and George Bugs Moran. 26-year-old Jaime Weiss becomes the new leader on the north side.
Yeah. He's got plenty of enemies, but so do I. I gotta watch my back too.
Jaime Weiss was a hot-tempered Pole. He was the only North Sider that Al Capone truly feared because he was very unpredictable. He'd fly off at the handle at any slightest provocation.
Dead.
23-year-old Bugs Moran is second in command.
Bugs Moran, who was an ally of Dean O'Banion, was more like a thug. He was a very handsome, devilish thug, but he was more of a gunman who was carrying out orders, and he had no head for strategy particularly.
Weiss and Moran vowed to avenge their boss's murder.
When O'Banion was murdered, Weiss and Moran not only lost a leader, they also lost a best friend. They viewed it as a personal loss, and therefore their reaction was not only violent, not only bloody, but extremely vindictive and relentless.
The O'Banion killing marks a bloody war of retaliation between the North and South Side gangs that will last for the next 6 years. For Weiss and Moran, killing Johnny Torrio and Al Capone becomes their primary mission, and they won't delegate that task to any underling. They'll see to it personally. January 24th, 1925. Johnny Torrio is returning home from an afternoon of shopping with his wife. They have no idea that Weiss and Moran are waiting to pounce. Torrio lies helpless as Bugs Moran moves in. Only a miracle can save him now. January 24th, 1925. Gang warfare is escalating on the streets of Chicago. The man is Al Capone. The moment is the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The machine is the Thompson submachine gun. Johnny Torrio, the most powerful gang boss in Chicago, is about to die by the hand of Northside rival Bugs Moran.
Bugs Moran is reputed to have stood over him with a pistol to his head and ready to put the last around him, and click. You know, he was out of bullets.
Moran and Weiss leave Torrio barely alive with as many as 5 bullet wounds.
Torrio knew, after he survived that attack on him, that he had no stomach for the violence that was coming. He knew what was happening. He knew that it was time to step aside and hand the leadership over to Al Capone, who did have the stomach, who did have the ruthlessness to fight the North Siders on their own terms.
I'm quitting this. I'm giving you the business. I'm done. Good luck.
When Torrio retires, 26-year-old Al Capone is suddenly sitting on top of a multi-million-dollar conglomerate of breweries, speakeasies, brothels, and gambling joints. He'll have to fight to keep his empire from being torn apart by rival gangs. But he has the smarts and the skills to handle it. They were honed on the streets of New York. Alphonse Capone is born in Brooklyn, New York on January 17, 1899 to Italian immigrant parents. He's the fourth of 7 children. The family lives near the Brooklyn Navy Yards, which provide a busy market for the vice trade in the area.
That meant he grew up next to a lot of brothels that the sailors used. So that was his first exposure to vice. For Capone, it was probably second nature. It was just part of life. He really didn't think too much about it.
In the early 1900s, a mild-mannered gangster named Johnny Torrio sets up one of the first organized vice businesses in the neighborhood. He's got brothels and gambling joints, and Capone and other boys run errands for him.
Those kids didn't realize that they were actually being introduced to a life of crime and to behavior that could only get them in trouble as they got older.
But young Capone seems destined for trouble. He drops out of school at age 14 and prowls the streets with gangs of kids. He works odd jobs to help support his family.
He's a pin setter at a bowling alley. He works at a book bindery. He also works at a paper box factory. But he finds that the lure of making fast money in crime is a better way to go.
In 1917, at age 18, Capone gets a job at a Coney Island bar run by a local gangster.
Capone is very brash. He doesn't care about anybody. He makes his own rules and makes his own way and says what he feels when he feels like it.
One day at the bar, he makes an obscene comment to an attractive customer named Lena Galluccio, who's there with her brother Frank.
Hey, honey. Nice caboose.
Frank Galluccio loses it, demands that Al Capone apologizes to his sister.
It was a compliment. You're coming!
Capone's wounds will later give rise to his nickname, Scarface.
He was always very sensitive about it and tried to cover it over with powder to make it almost invisible. Nevertheless, it seemed to have almost a mythical effect.
Soon after the attack, senior mobsters order a truce.
I want us to shake hands. We could do well to put this all behind us.
Years later, Capone will hire Galluccio as a bodyguard on a trip back to New York. On December 4th, 1918, Capone's Irish girlfriend, May Coughlin, gives birth to a boy, whom they name Albert